You're watching CW Montana. This is the MTN 9 o'clock news.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Russ Riesinger. A plea from Yellowstone County health authorities tonight as the state sees its biggest jump in confirmed coronavirus cases since March. Montana health officials report a record 37 confirmed positives today, 10 of those here in Yellowstone County, where officials say resources are getting stressed. Today's report breaks the old record that was set back in March, and since then we have learned of another dozen confirmed cases on top of that. 2 of those in Bighorn County, as the confirmed active cases in Montana has now reached more than 200. The state reports the biggest increase in Yellowstone County, where a majority of those individuals are in their 20s, we're told. Now, you may be thinking that the increased number of cases is just because more tests are being done. Yellowstone County Health Officer John Felton says that's not the reason. He says almost all of the recent positive tests are people who were showing symptoms of COVID-19, and the results of the mass testing that took place at Metro Park this past weekend still aren't available yet. Now, along with the rising numbers, he's also concerned about 2 other indicators that they're monitoring. One is the capacity of our health system. The other is difficulty in doing contact tracing.
Today, we have 32 active cases, and close contacts for each of those people range from a single person up to 15 people. Obviously, the more close contacts an infected person has, the longer the contact tracing takes. Contact tracing is also made more challenging because people are venturing out more and finding it difficult to recall where they have been and who they have been with for the last 14 days or so. An accurate look back is what helps us identify others who may be infected.
Now, Felton would have the right to impose stricter regulations once again and could if things worsen, but he says he has no plans to do that right now. Well, the results from last weekend's free testing at Metro Park of 463 people are not yet known. Riverstone Health will hold its next free testing session Saturday, July 11th from 9 a.m. until noon. That is again going to be in the upper parking lot of Metro Park. These growing numbers come after 6 weeks of extremely low counts and the start of reopening the state's economy. Governor Bullock and top state health officials say the surge is not entirely unexpected, but it's also framed how Montanans can slow it down. MTN's Mike Dennison has the story.
At a Capitol News conference Wednesday, Jim Murphy, the head of the State Communicable Disease Control and Prevention Bureau, said the main factors are more contact among people, in groups or at work, as the economy reopened, and more available testing. For example, an outbreak occurred among healthcare workers in Missoula that was traced to cases in Helena and maybe elsewhere.
It shows how contagious this virus is and how even in a workplace setting, not social distancing or not using PPE all the time can lead to a pretty quick outbreak.
In Miles City, where cases jumped dramatically this month, health department tracers identified several group gatherings where infections occurred and that had spread to 4 other counties.
So if you liken it to like a wildfire, right, you have a spark that's going into another county and setting off another potential cluster of cases.
In the last week, new cases have been reported in 24 Montana counties, including some that previously had no cases. 29 of those cases were in Bighorn County, home to the Crow Indian Reservation, where Anderson says many people tested had shown no symptoms of the disease, but likely were still spreading it. The contact tracing identifies who had contact with those infected, tests them, and directs them to quarantine, or if they have the disease, isolate until they recover. Chief State Medical Officer Greg Holtzman says the virus can survive outside a warm body, so if the transmission can be stopped, so can the disease. He says that's why it's vitally important for people to continue with social distancing and take precautions like wearing masks when they can't distance.
We don't want to go backwards. We want people to feel safe. We want people to be safe. And we want schools to reopen in the fall. And yes, there are some inconveniences, and we are all going to have to deal with that. But those are so minor when we consider the alternatives. We cannot do this alone. I cannot stress that enough. We cannot do this alone. We might disagree on everything else, but we are all in this together.
Reporting from Helena, Mike Dennison, MTN News.
Well, Montana still has one of the lowest infection rates in the nation, even though our reported cases overall jumped by 30% in the last 9 days. As the number of coronavirus cases rises at a near record rate in the U.S., some states are starting to put restrictions back into place. The CDC is also updating its list of who is most at risk of getting severe COVID. Chris Martinez reports from Los Angeles.
Texas is now pausing further reopening plans and suspending elective surgeries in the state's biggest counties as coronavirus cases and hospitalizations surge.
Over the past few weeks, we've seen a dramatic increase in the spread of COVID-19.
Arizona is another hot spot. It reported more than 3,000 new cases Thursday. Hospitalizations are also at a record high. In Florida, state health figures show coronavirus testing slowed as cases surged to record levels.
I think we had COVID on the ropes. We were doing very well, and it's making a comeback.
California reported more than 7,000 new cases yesterday. Los Angeles County has recorded more than 89,000 cases since the pandemic began, more than any other county in the nation. The CDC said Thursday the risk of getting severely ill from the virus increases with age, and it's not just those over 65. The agency says the underlying medical conditions that increase the risk are chronic kidney disease, COPD, obesity, weakened immune system, heart conditions, sickle cell disease, and type 2 diabetes. The CDC estimates 60% of Americans have at least one underlying condition. Chris Martinez, CBS News, Los Angeles.
Other conditions that might increase the risk of severe illness are pregnancy, asthma, high blood pressure, dementia, and stroke. Billings police have arrested a suspect who allegedly pulled a gun on an officer early this morning. It happened close to the big ditch near 12th Avenue North and North 22nd Street around 3:30. Officer Brett Hildy approached a man who possibly had left a stolen motorcycle at the Cenex station about 6 blocks away. Hildy asked the man to stop and walk toward him. When the man resisted handcuffs, Hildy says he got his taser ready. Chief Rich St. John says when the man pulled out a semi-automatic handgun, the officer quickly fired one round and the suspect headed east. Police arrested 31-year-old Corey Simon a little before 2 o'clock this afternoon on Industrial Avenue. Tonight he's being held at the Yellowstone County Detention Facility for obstructing, resisting, and felony assault on a peace officer. He has minor injuries and was not hit by the bullet.
As Officer Hildy deployed his taser, he saw the subject pull a semi-automatic handgun from his waistband and pull the slide back, essentially preparing it to be fired. Officer Hildy abandoned his taser. As he did, he pulled his handgun. Officer Hildy turned back to face the subject and saw him moving, presumably to maneuver to the high ground or to find cover to fire from. Regardless, fearing for his safety, Officer Hildy fired one round.
Now, Officer Hildy suffered cuts and abrasions from the fight. As is protocol in officer-involved shootings, Hildy is on administrative leave. George Floyd's death under the knee of a police officer in Minneapolis sparked weeks of protests nationwide and calls for police reform. Now the House has passed legislation named in his honor. Skylar Henry has more details from Washington.
On this vote, the yeas are 236, the nays are 181. The bill is passed.
House Democrats voted to pass a police reform bill 1 month after the death of George Floyd.
It was not until the advent of the cell phone camera that the stories of police abuse were finally exposed to the world. Before then, the deaths were simply disregarded, not believed, not acknowledged.
The bill includes a ban on chokeholds and would make it easier to file civil lawsuits against officers accused of misconduct.
The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act will fundamentally transform the culture of policing to address systemic racism, curb police brutality, and bring accountability to our police departments.
Republicans say Democrats blocked every amendment they proposed.
Never consulted us on the creation of this bill. I've reached out to those on the Democrat side, explaining that I wanted to make law. I wanted to work together, and I still do.
Senate Democrats made the same complaint before blocking a Republican police reform bill Wednesday.
President Trump says he won't support any bill that hurts police. He's also ordering U.S. Marshals to work with local police to stand guard around statues on federal land across the country.
The president says he will sign an executive order to further protect the statues, and he tweeted that they are some of our great works of art that represent our history and heritage.
I think many of the people that are knocking down these statues don't even have any idea what the statue is, what it means, who it is.
The Army has activated but not yet deployed 400 members of the Washington, D.C. National Guard to prevent any further damage to the monuments. Skyler Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has already said he will not bring up the House's police reform bill for a vote in the Senate, calling it an overreach. We now know the names of 3 victims from 2 fatal crashes this week in Bighorn County. One of those a Billings woman. Tuesday afternoon, 32-year-old Jolynn Prettyman from Billings died when her vehicle rolled on Highway 91. Prettyman, who was not wearing a seatbelt, was ejected and pronounced dead at the scene. And 41-year-old Melanie DeCrane and 44-year-old Daryl Lefthand were the 2 pedestrians killed on Highway 451 near Wyola just after midnight Tuesday. The husband and wife were struck by a 19-year-old driver from Sundance, Wyoming, who said he didn't see them. Well, with the summer season always comes a rise in fatal car and motorcycle accidents, not only throughout Montana, but within Billings as well. Trooper and traffic homicide investigator Aaron Freivald says that increase is due to nicer weather and more visitors. He says most of the fatal accidents he's seen are on the highway due to higher speeds. This year alone, the state has seen 80 deaths on Montana highways, but Freivald cautions that people should still implement 3 important safety measures within city limits.
The big 3 has never really changed. We don't want you driving impaired. We don't want you to exceed the speed limit, and we do want you wearing your seatbelt. With those 3 things, I would say 80% of the fatality crashes I investigate would not have resulted in a fatality crash. So those are the big 3 things that we really always want to remind drivers of.
Freivald encourages people to practice straight line braking, saying people should not swerve to avoid animals they may suddenly encounter on the road. This will avoid further accidents caused by overcorrecting. Still to come on tonight's 9 o'clock news, 70 years ago today, the Korean War began. We talk with 2 Montana veterans who share their experiences. But first, Bob McGuire's in next with your complete 7-day forecast.